You need to continue to build relationships because of what you do. You work with so many different types of people, suppliers, subcontractors that are helping you manage your facilities because you can't do it all yourself. And so by making those connections and building those relationships, you've got a plethora of resources or connections that are going to help you.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you're ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. Today, host Lindsay Young, a strategic marketing consultant at New Marketing, and Tim Pyle, the Western Regional Sales Manager at Metal Fob Inc., discuss the essentials of effective networking. They offer practical tips for both extroverts and introverts, stressing the importance of intentional planning, leveraging platforms like LinkedIn, and maintaining professional etiquette. The conversation includes real-world examples and strategies for facility managers to build a robust network of reliable connections. Now, let's get into it.
Hello, this is Lindsay Young with New Marketing. I am a AEC architecture, engineering, construction marketing consultant in the Midwest, and I am involved in the IFMA chapter in Wichita and have helped them for about 10 years with their marketing and business development, specifically events and social media.
Tim Pyle with Metal Fab. I'm a Western Regional Sales Manager, but prior to that, I've been in several different business development roles, marketing roles, client relations roles in the AEC industry for the last 7 or 8 years. And so a little bit of experience of networking and got to hang out with Lindsay networking, meeting at networking events. And so it really just is a kind of a natural conversation for both of us because it's something we both really enjoy doing, but also understand it's something we have to be very intentional at. Even if it's something that comes natural to us, you've got to be planning ahead and thinking about it. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tim. Networking is typically a naughty word or people kind of get scared about it. So, Tim, let's kind of talk about what networking really is or what we think networking is or what it can be.
Yeah. So for me, networking really boils down to relationships. It's 100%. The purpose of it is to build relationships with those in your industry, those that are potential connections or existing connections, a place to be able to just have another touch point with them. But it really comes down to relationships. That's the goal of any networking event that I ever go to, is just to build relationships, not to sell, not to land that deal, not to even necessarily talk too much about project, like actual projects at the time, but really just to build relationships with people.
Yeah. Well, and I think networking, I'm going to kind of expand on what you said, is
Yeah.
networking is not about selling. It's building that trust and building those relationships. And I think as facility managers, you're building relationships every single day
Mhm.
and you need to continue to build relationships because of what you do. You work with so many different types of people, suppliers, subcontractors that are helping you manage your facilities because you can't do it all yourself. And so by making those connections and building those relationships, you've got a plethora of resources or connections that are going to help you. So, the traditional networking is okay, I'm going to an event and, networking and meeting people. And yes, that's a component of it. But it's also, okay, who do I know that knows somebody that I need to know? And putting those referral partners and referral connections together as well. So I think we need to think of it from that perspective as well. And IFMA is a great place for you to do that,
Yeah.
to meet those people as a facility manager and making those connections of those resources or those people that are going to help you in your position and help you with your facility.
Yeah, I know previously in another role, I did work for like a building controls contractor. And so part of that was I wanted to build relationships with the facilities managers, not for a sell point, but to just have that relationship with them that they knew that they could call us when stuff hit the fan and they were in an emergency, dire situation. They knew who had their back. And so I wanted to build that relationship with them. And so I think about facility managers and like we said, it's not this necessarily just sales thing as much as it is, they just want to build relationships with the HVAC guy, with the electrical guy, with the plumbing guy. Because when you need a plumber, you need a plumber fast. But anytime that you need a plumber, you need them fast and you want to know who you can call and who you can count on. And so I think that's where the importance of networking is going to come in for facilities managers, just knowing who has their back when it's time for them to make that call.
Well, and one component I think to networking that uh, I think businesses or business people in general maybe miss the boat a little bit is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is
Mhm.
a platform I know, Tim, you and I both use pretty heavily. And that's a great place to not only connect, but learn about our industry. I mean, IFMA is very active, and so is IFMA Wichita on the social media platforms, but sharing those resources. And so, again, that's another component to networking is okay, how can this information help my network? And sharing that, those articles or the different things on LinkedIn and connecting again with those, suppliers or other facility managers around the country and even around the world that maybe they're encountering a problem that you're encountering. And now you're connected with them. You can call or reach out to them and say, hey, I'm having this issue. Can you help me out? I know you've dealt with the same thing. So
Yeah.
again, you're building that network to help you in your position and in your career.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily like I think a strong part of it is going to be the subcontractors or the people that they're going to be working with, but a huge part of it is other facility managers.
Mhm.
I'm actually the president of an HOA right now, and we're fighting algae in the water. And I'm like, I just wish I had another HOA that I could call that's been around longer to say, what did you guys do to deal with this? And that's just a correlation or just another example of like an area where having peers that have gone through what you're going through, it's going to be huge because every facilities managers, their whiteboard, their issues, their concerns are all the same. It's just going to be on different levels and scales. And so to have somebody who has been through that so they can support you and then also you back to them if you've gone through something that you see them going through. And maybe it is something we're able to connect on LinkedIn and it is articles, it is things that can be shared back and forth. But I think that peer to peer relationships just as important as it is going to be with the people that's working for you.
Well, and one of the things I know Tim and I talk a lot about too is introverts and extroverts. And
Mhm.
both Tim and I are extrovert. He's probably more extroverted than I am, but we
That's
are
no
both
doubt.
extroverts
Yeah.
by nature. And so I want to talk about that because most people are actually introverted versus extroverted. And so from a networking perspective, it is a little bit easier for extroverts to network.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually talk about introverts and then I'm going to let Tim talk a little bit about extroverts. So as an introvert, you're a better listener than us extroverts. So you ask better questions and you
Yeah.
remember more things. You build deeper connections with people versus Tim and I want to be friends with everybody. So take advantage of being an introvert. And so when maybe you go to these events, work at the registration table. That's an easy way to meet a lot of people and get to know a lot of people because they're coming to you, they're checking in. You then, call them by name, you can put a face with the name. So think of different ways. That's one way as an introvert that you can network and meet a lot of people is working that registration table,
Mhm.
specifically at an event.
Yeah.
So, from the extrovert standpoint, Tim, why don't you give us some examples on that?
The biggest thing with being an extrovert, it's setting realistic expectations. You're not going to go to an event with 100 people and walk away knowing 100 people. It has to be realistic that I'm going to meet 7 to 8 people, but not only having a realistic expectation of going in of what you're actually going to accomplish, but it's also going in knowing that of those 100 people, like you said, majority might be introverts. So let's not dominate the conversation. Let's not control the room. Let's allow and give a space for introverts to be in the room, for them to be a part of the conversation. And so I know for me, I have to be very intentional as an extrovert in a networking situation where there's a lot of people. I'm looking for opportunities to bring an introvert that maybe I know into the circle and introduce them and make that introduction for them, making sure that I'm asking them specific questions to get them involved in the conversation. But again, it's also me not oversharing or trying to one up anybody, but to just add to the conversation, but really trying to bring in introverts. And so I think same thing for introverts. They're gonna, and you can speak to this too, but like they've got to be intentional. They've got to have a realistic expectation. And then they have to be intentional on, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to have these conversations.
Right. Well, and I think from an introvert, it's an easy follow-up when you're an introvert after you've went to an event to connect with that person then on
Yeah.
on LinkedIn because it's a natural, hey, we've met. This is where we met or how we met or the conversation we have. And then you're going to see each other posting different things and you can start to build that relationship online. From the standpoint of LinkedIn, that's a component to networking that does not replace networking and building relationships. So that's another tool in your toolbox. But from an introvert standpoint, that is definitely a great place to help you be more comfortable and practice that networking or that building relationship with those people.
Hey FMs, get ready for an unforgettable experience and amazing networking opportunities at this year's World's Workplace Conference and Expo on October 9 to 11 in San Antonio, Texas. Don't miss our must-attend welcome reception where the fun kicks off with a fiesta-themed party. Attend our Explore FM event, meet new faces at the First Timers reception, and connect with future leaders at the Student and Young Professional reception. Plus, enjoy professional networking throughout the expo hall, educational sessions, and networking group activities. World's Workplace is one of the best ways to connect with experts in the industry and grow your professional network. Register today at worldsworkplace.ifma.org. See you there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the other things that whenever you're looking at an event, it's just a lot of it's planning. It's not just showing up and winging it. This is for introverts and extroverts. You don't want to just show up to something and just wing it. When it specifically, like if you're going to an IFMA event, a lot of times you can find out ahead of time who registered for that. So you're going to know maybe what contractors are going to be there, what other facility managers are going to be there. And so you can kind of game plan and say, okay, these are some of the people I may want to connect with, or I work for this hotel chain or this restaurant or this hospital. Well, I know that this other hospital, this other same trade facility manager is going to be there. I want to connect with them because I heard that they had these issues at their facility and I want to know how they dealt with them because at some point I'm probably going to deal with that. And so a lot of it's just game planning ahead of time and not just showing up and trying to wing it.
Yeah. Well, and also one of my, I'm going to say, early career lessons learned, and I didn't really know what it was or what networking was, even though I've done it for 20 years. In 2010, if you were in the industry, that was the big, the first recession that we had. And unfortunately, I was laid off from my job. Well, the previous 4 years, I had a position that I was networking and building relationships and making those connections that when I got laid off, I had a whole host of people that I could tap into and say, hey, I'm looking for a job and this is what I'm looking for. And I was fortunate enough that I got several different offers and had several conversations with those employers. So not only from a business, but that's kind of a more personal story that my network has helped me get my jobs. And then obviously now being a business owner, my network has also helped me. But I think you've got to think of those types of things too, is that it's not just work related. It could also help you in a personal situation like this, which obviously is career related, but having those connections, and because 75% of the jobs are not posted on LinkedIn or Career Builder or even
Yeah.
somebody's website. So having that network helps you lands you your next job or your promotion too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's the thing is, and all that comes from relationships because of whatever your reputation was in that space. And then also just the reputation and then also the relationship that those people had with you that they would go to bat for you. So no, that's a good talking point where it is personal, but it's also going to be professional. It's going to be across the board.
Well, and it's kind of what you were talking about earlier, Tim, about, HOA. That's not really business related, but I'm sure you're using your network to reach out to, like, hey, somebody else has got to have the same problem that you're connected with, and
Yeah.
you'll figure it out because you have enough connections that you may not know them directly, but it might be a connection that you have. And actually, I was thinking, we're gonna do a real world example here, Tim. So I have a client that does mostly work in HOAs. And so I'm thinking to myself, when you said that, well, I can hook
Yeah.
up with some people to help him
Yeah.
with his algae problem.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah, no, but you use all that network and it's the thing that's trying to keep those relationships active too, because a lot of times when I'm going to a networking event, it may be for me when I was in a sales role, it's like, well, I want to find 2 to 3 people that have potential future work. And I'm not going to talk to them about the future work at that networking event, but I want to know that they have it and then set up a follow-up meeting. But I also know there's going to be 5 to 10 people that I see at these networking events on a regular basis that I just want to keep that existing relationship. And so some of the conversations are to keep and manage the existing relationships, and some of it's going to be to build new, because you want the full gamut of both sides of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another thing, and it's you and I know struggle with this or challenge with this is I think they say it's like 100 people that you can really like have a consistent, touch base. I know you and I probably have 2,000 contacts or connections on LinkedIn, but it's also kind of what you're saying at those physical events, trying to connect with new people, but maintaining those existing relationships. And it's hard because, especially when you are in a market that you're well known or have a great network, it's hard to sometimes pull yourself away from those new people, or I mean, from the existing connections to
Yeah.
meet those new people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cause I know
So
I struggle with that sometimes too.
yeah, for sure. I think a shift of conversation. I would love to hear some of your insight on kind of like when you're at a networking event, what's some of the etiquette and some of the things that we want to keep in mind. Because I think sometimes we take it for granted. I'm going to a networking event. I'm going to hang out with people, but there's etiquette and there's things that there's rules that people break that you and I break if we're not thinking about it. And then there's just, yeah. What's some things that come to mind when I say that?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is if you're an introvert and you're going into the room there, and if there's somebody, or even if you're an extrovert, somebody standing by themselves, and I think maybe you mentioned this earlier, going up and talking to them.
Mhm.
Another thing is not interrupting, which again, I'm working on this. I'm guilty of interrupting people and not listening. And that kind of goes hand in hand is ask a question and really listen with the
Mhm.
intent not to respond, but to really listen to them.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think those are a few things I think that regardless of what your introvert extrovert is, that kind of the best practices to networking. I think another thing also is be aware of how much you drink. I know that's, a lot of the times these are happy hours
Yeah.
or if you're at a golf tournament, you're, drinking all day. But, unfortunately, I have been at several events where there's a heavy drinking and you need to be aware of that. That to me seems obvious, but it's unfortunately not either. So just be aware of that in terms of, your alcohol intake.
Yeah.
What
No,
what
that's
what are some things that you've seen
yeah.
or good or bad?
I like the alcohol one because I can specifically remember times where there was somebody who drank too much. And the thing is, I'll always remember that. And so it's like, for them, it's like, I wish you hadn't done that. One of them for me is it's interesting to me is to do a little bit of people watching, but it's when I'm walking the space or walking the room where there's at, I just want to be always looking around and checking to see, okay, who's all here? What circles are there? But with the circles, what's always interesting to me because I think people are always nervous to try to enter a circle. And they go, how do I get into a circle? And I think there shouldn't be an issue at a networking event. Everybody is there to meet people. So anybody inside of a circle, if anybody is even hovering around your circle, you should immediately be opening it up and inviting them into the circle. And so that's one of the things where I'm trying to be intentional that if I'm trying to get into a circle that they allow me in and that they open it up, or if I'm inside of a circle, one of the etiquette things I would say is if I'm in a circle and I can tell someone's wanting in, because sometimes an introvert's going to just stand on the outside and not
Mhm.
ever push themselves into a conversation. I love to, hey guys, let's make room for this person to be able to come join our conversation. And so it's just part of the etiquette is just keeping that flow of people coming in and out. And some of it's also going to be when to leave a conversation.
Mhm.
One of the things I used to be really guilty at is I would find 1 or 2 people that I knew at that event and I'd spend the entire 45 minutes or hour with them. And it's like it didn't do me any good to spend that entire time with them. Whereas it was been better for me to either introduce them to people or have them do the same for me. You're going to see this at an IFMA event. You're going to see a lot of the same people that you're going to spend time with on a regular basis at the events. But at the same time, if you're with those same people and you see somebody new, ask them if they know them. And if they do, have them introduce you. If you know them, but you don't think they do, introduce them. But it's trying not to just spend all of your time with one individual or 2 individuals. And that's something I have to be intentional at because it's real easy to go to an event. We used to be a part of SMPS, or SMPS is an organization that we're a part of that you see a lot of the same people. So it's real easy for that event to hang out with that one person. And if you're not intentional, you're going to accidentally spend the entire time with them because that may be the only time you do see them, but it's just being more intentional about that.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of touched a little bit on this, and I want to give an example. I call it kind of the buddy system. So
Mhm.
I moved to Northwest Arkansas about 8 years ago. So I had to kind of start over in terms of building my network when I moved from Wichita, Kansas. So I had to meet everybody because I knew like 5 people when I moved to Northwest Arkansas. And so one of the things that I did was I immediately figured out who was well connected in kind of my circle. And her name's Kelly. And I figured out she knew a lot of people in the industry and a lot of people in the market. And so I would, not every event, but I would be strategic in which events that I knew her and I were going to together. And I would say, hey, will you take me around and introduce me to some people that I need to know in our market and in our network? And she's like, yeah, sure. That's so that, that was hard I shouldn't say hard, but I would walk into a room and not know anybody. Well, having a buddy system, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, that buddy system helps you because it's like, okay, this person has a well established network. They can introduce me to people that I need to be introduced to. And
Yeah.
you can be strategic about who you ask to do that with. And
Yeah.
so I've met a lot of people through Kelly because I know, and I'll call her or text her. I'm like, hey, do you know such and such? Yeah. Okay. Can you introduce me? And so, finding those people in your markets. And Tim, I feel like you're one of those people too, because
Yeah.
you're usually at the top of my list of like, okay, I got to reach out to Tim because he might know this person. And so you kind of have those top of mind
Yeah.
people that are connected. So find those people in your market or in your industry
Yeah.
and ask them, hey, will you be my buddy at some of these events that you're going to and introduce me to some of these people?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a really good thing too to talk about too is the questions. Like it's really good to have your ammunition of what questions you want to ask whenever you're going to something. I was at a networking event this last weekend, and the guy walked over to me and he goes, "Weather, right?" And it was just made me laugh because he was just like, "Weather," and it's like he didn't know what to talk about, and so he was just like, "Weather, it's crazy," and it's like he was almost making fun of the fact that so often we will go to weather, but it's like just having questions about what do they do? What's their role with their company? What are some of the struggles that they have not with their company, but with the role? And then just getting to know about their families, getting to know about their hobbies, because everybody likes talking about themselves. Everybody has a hobby that they love talking about, whether it's concerts or it's sports or golf or bourbon is a big one for me that you enjoy talking about it. And so I think it's really important to have those lists of questions in your head before so you can be intentional. Or part of that's just I think that's the kind of the summary of this is be intentional with your time that you have for networking. What are your goals that you're setting for it? How many people are you hoping to maybe meet, or look ahead of the time of who might be there that you can say, okay, this is who I want to maybe spend a little bit of time with. Being intentional as an introvert that you're going to put yourself out there and that you're going to force yourself to join the conversation. Being intentional that as an extrovert, you're going to allow the introvert to have the space as well, not dominate the questions, not one up. That's a big one. Do not be a one upper. And then just being intentional about your time there and just that you're doing the right thing by your company being there. Cause a lot of times you're taking time from work to be there. So it's going to be making sure that it's worth your company's time that you are there as well. Do you have any other kind of closing thoughts like that as summary?
Yeah, I mean, networking has been a big component to the success of my career, and I
Mhm.
can't speak enough about it. But again, it's really about building relationships. I always say it's helping, sharing, giving. That's really what networking is about. And so I kind of want, in closing, there's a resource, and I know it'll be in the show notes as well. It's called The Go Giver, and it talks about networking and what that looks like. And has nothing to do with selling. It's about helping, sharing, giving, building relationships, building trust. And so we want you to walk away and know whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, if networking is part of your job or not part of your job, you need to be doing it regardless. Like it's
Yeah.
an important component to your personal and professional life and career path. So
Awesome. It was awesome talking networking with you. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
this has been great, Tim.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And as always, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for more incredible content.